Today, we bring you a list of 20 disturbing things that were found in the forest. A humpback whale in the middle of the forest. Many people will not be surprised to find many animals in the forest. However, some species may not appear in the green surroundings. Imagine the surprise of fishermen who happened to be on Marajo Island in 2019 when they found something that isn't easily explainable. A large animal that was found was covered with bad smells that could be sensed for miles. But when they saw that it had a tail, they realized it must be some kind of a whale, considering its size. The creature was 26 feet, or approximately 8 meters, long, and it somehow found itself in the misfortune of being thrown about 50 feet, or 15 meters, into the forest. We can't seem to find a clear explanation of how this occurred, that an 11-ton heavy whale got stuck between the trees. Besides, there is no natural form of wave that could throw this heavy creature onto the ground, and it wasn't even the whale's natural habitat. Booby traps. In 2012, a man was patrolling through a hiking trail deep in the forest. Walking around, he must have been enjoying the scenery, but something caught his attention, and it was something that he didn't like. Namely, the man found a tripwire that was strung between the trees along the hiking trail. Now, we might have used this at some ancient times as a way to hunt, but considering where this was found and how strategically it was positioned, it is most likely it was intended to harm or do damage to people. What further confirms this thought is that these traps weren't the only ones that were found in the woods. Instead, there were sharpened stakes hanging in the air, awaiting an unsuspecting hiker to take his last walk. After an investigation, it was found that it was 2 teenagers who had set up these traps, claiming they were for animals. But we aren't sure such ideas could be trusted, and the police weren't persuaded either. Posters of missing people. The next case that we will be discussing could prove another very traumatic experience. In 2016, a guy walked through Berkeley-Jackson Country Park in New York. Instead of enjoying the simplicity and relaxation of a walk through the forest, he stumbled upon something that definitely shocked the world. Before he realized what it was, the man got close to some of the papers hanging from trees, and he recognized it was something deeply disturbing. These papers were posters of missing persons, and they showed many young faces that the world couldn't find. Over 20 of these posters were found and recorded, and what's worse, in the aftermath of the event, it was discovered that these weren't just a made-up prank, but actual posters of people of whom we lost trace. A lot of work was put into what we later discovered was a Halloween preparation, but some of the public isn't convinced that someone will go as far as to creep everyone out in such a way. A suitcase with a human skull in it. In the same year in which the previous discovery in the forest was made, construction workers were conducting their business near a road in Georgia. As it so happens, the ongoing work was alongside a forest, and as luck would have it, a worker went into the woods for a brief pause from his job. Instead of finding some peace and cover from the sun, he found the most disturbing thing. At first, the object that he discovered seemed a bit odd, but he couldn't have guessed how creepy it would turn out to be. Namely, it was a suitcase that the man approached and pried open so he could see what could be inside. Imagine his fright when he discovers the suitcase holds a human skull inside it. Running back to alarm the others, the man brought workers and the police to the scene, which later turned into a place where not just the skull, but the remaining bones of a woman were found. The poor soul's body seems to have been sitting in this forest for at least 6 months before it was found. A house of a witch. This discovery was also made in Georgia, this time in Horstved Wood. Now, many fantasy stories and fairy tales mention that woods are exactly where witches sometimes prefer to stick their houses. According to some legends, these houses may even be able to move on their own and suit their need for cover among the trees. This is what we may stumble upon if we were to hike through the area that we just mentioned. A sign that spells Flintholm may welcome you if you get close to this creepy house. Due to how eerie it is, the locals call it the Witch's House. This old place has definitely been battling the passage of time. It has collapsed and become quite a menacing ruin, inspiring the imagination of many. A thorough exploration of this house's background discovered that it was built in the 1930s by a man who was evicted from it by German soldiers. This was when the ruin and mystery about the place ensued. The cache's well a hunted place. This one takes us to England. It's referred to as one of the UK's most cursed and hunted places, and considering how murky the history behind it is, you won't be too surprised that many stories have accumulated around it. This place started out as a well that was made during the 20th century. However, the place that was chosen to fetch water wasn't a good one, and any liquid that could be pulled from it wasn't safe for humans or even animals. Weirdly, there was a guy who felt this wasn't to be treated as a mistake. Instead, he made 5 more of these wells and created his own snake oil scheme. He bottled the weirdly tasting water and sold it for its medical properties. The name of the product was Venge Water. According to the seller, it can help you with almost anything from your brain to your gut. It was a cure-all. You can easily imagine that this story was actually quite a sad one, considering that dirty water could only cause health issues. I See You. The next video will show you what a scary experience this camper had when he wanted to enjoy a night in the forest. This happened at Lake Quebec, and it all started out as the man was enjoying the peaceful forest sounds and the soothing crackling of the campfire he had made. Since he heard something was happening nearby, he went to investigate using only the flashlight that he had at hand. In this pitch-dark scenery, he moved around, and at one point switched off his flashlight to show his audience how impossible it is to see in these circumstances when a creepy voice from afar screamed out, "I see you."
Oh, f***. Oh, hi. What the hell? I need to get out of here.
Boy, would that be a sleepless night for me! Even though the man tried to find who this was, he couldn't find anyone close. A bunker. Apparently, creating a bunker in the middle of the woods has been someone's idea of how to hide yourself away from civilization in the worst-case scenario. In 2014, 2 people were walking through the woods in Germany, and they stumbled across a huge metal door lying in the middle of the ground. They must have felt adventurous that day since, instead of getting as far from it as they could, they decided to enter, which is how we got these creepy and scary images. Apparently, there were numerous corridors and rooms below the ground. As if this wasn't disturbing enough, there was a lot of graffiti down there as well, and their meaning just added to the creepiness of the place. Some of them asked for help or even greeted Satan. A 3 almost caused a serious accident. This video was made in 2013, and it came from a dash cam. Right from the start, we see that it's pitch black, and even though these people were driving right along the forest, it couldn't be seen, well, until one scary moment when, out of nowhere, a tree fell right in front of the car. Now, we don't know how things are where you come from, but in our place, trees don't behave this maniacally on their own. The best guess we have is that it could have been a large animal that pushed it down, or something else entirely. Luckily, people had no serious consequences. An unimaginable kind of trap for humans. The next case we will discuss took place in 2016. A man walking in Kentucky's forest stumbled upon something that he couldn't immediately recognize just next to a trail path. When he went to check what this strange item attached to the tree was, he realized that it was a trail camera. Now, we shouldn't be much surprised by it. After all, these are often used by hunters and explorers who like seeing how wildlife behaves when no one's looking. However, there's a bit of a twist to this story. After taking the camera off the tree, he discovered that it had no battery, so he wanted to see what it could have recorded and took it to his friend. This is what sealed the man's fate, considering that once he placed the batteries inside the device, it exploded. Luckily, the man survived, but was left with some injuries. After an investigation, more of these deadly traps were found throughout the same forest, and the man behind them was later caught. The search of his place showed that he had all the equipment to create these unbelievably disturbing explosive devices. A hiker that has gone missing. This Russian man went on a solo hiking experience back in 2017, but no one has seen him after. People searched around the Moscow area where he went hiking, but weren't able to find any trails of him. Since he went missing in such curious circumstances, some assumed that a tragedy must have befallen him. As we will find out about 2 years later, this indeed seems to have been the case. Since this hiking area that the man chose for his adventure was a popular one, another person who went for a walk 2 years later discovered something very disturbing. The frightening scene and the skeleton that they found turned out to be the missing hiker. The weird thing is that it isn't the man's skeleton that creeped out the people who found him, but also that there were multiple handcuffs all around the place and similar binding equipment that included chains. Later, by interviewing those who knew the hiker, it was discovered that it isn't entirely impossible that he was out practicing the art of escaping cuffs and chains, but as we have seen the end results, we can conclude that this went terribly wrong. Creepy mannequins. If you are a fan of the horror genre, you may know that mannequins are often used as a way to instill fear in the audience that enjoys such a thrill. The video that we will show you comes from a guy who makes camping videos together with his daughter as they are moving all around the world. At one point, he was hiking in a forest in Scotland and had made quite a creepy discovery. On their way to find a good camping place, they stumbled upon a group of menacing-looking mannequins that were positioned to look at the road. Imagine stumbling upon this scene during the night. What adds to the creepiness of this find is that all the mannequins are very detailedly placed. Among them, there are those who seem to be working the laundry, and others are climbing the tree using the stairs. The whole place was also surrounded by very creepy graffiti showing nude figures. A freezer with a body in it. Police officers in Alaska received a strange report, which they immediately knew could mean something very bad. Namely, there was apparently a freezer in the middle of the woods, and no one knew where it came from. When they showed up on the scene, what they found was, indeed, a freezer that was half buried in the ground. And once they opened it, they found that there was a body inside it. Imagine what a disturbing sight this has been, both for the police and those who have initially found it. The body that was found inside was later identified as a man who lived nearby, but we have no idea how or when he was rid of his life in this gruesome way. A biker nearly hurt due to a booby trap. We bring you next a video that shows how close this biker was to a very serious injury that a booby trap could have caused was he not wearing the proper equipment. The man seems quite experienced, maybe even familiar with this exact trail through the woods. As he is driving, it isn't unusual for the trees and the surrounding growth to tap on his helmet slightly. Imagine his surprise when, instead of a slight tap, what he experienced was a strong yanking that nearly pulled him off of his bike, or even worse, nearly left him without a head. This video may serve as another warning that even when things feel safe, and even if we know the path, we can't be sure that some weird soul hasn't meddled with the surroundings and put us in danger. Stone Faces. We bring you the story of Cudworth Stone Faces, or Cudworth Grotesques as they became known. These are, as the name suggests, faces that are carved into stone near the town of Cudworth. Records show that we first stumbled upon these interesting artifacts in the 1800s, and some guess that they originated in the 13th century. What these faces are doing in the middle of the woods isn't entirely clear. Some suggest that these could have been decorations of some form of building or object. Then again, this is just the best guess that we currently have, and we have no idea where they actually came from. Among various theories that arose around these figures, some suggest these could have religious meaning or even be protective charms against evil. The Robison Family. In 1968, a group of people were enjoying a beautiful day in the woods, but their fun was cut short by a vile smell that was spreading throughout the forest. Since they were disturbed and couldn't go about their day because of the stench, they decided to seek where it was coming from, as they believed it must be the corpse of an animal. Once you see the end of this case, you will wish that it was actually an animal. Instead, these folks realized that even though it was about half a mile from them, the unbearable smell was coming from a cabin in the middle of the forest. This was probably the first moment where they felt something was very wrong. Pushing through the heavy smell, they wanted to look through the windows and first noticed that there were holes in them. Through these holes, they peeked and discovered a body lying on the floor. Disturbed by what they saw, they wanted to provide support and immediately called the police. After the house was breached, what was found inside were 6 bodies that accounted for all the members of the family that used to live there. What preceded this unfortunate event was that the family let everyone know they would be going on a trip, so no one was suspicious when nothing was heard of them for multiple weeks. Due to this turn of events, a whole month went by before the murder was discovered, and considering the lack of evidence and viable suspects, we have never seen the end of this mystery. Cosas, the greatest contribution to surrealism. The next video we will show you is about another artistic expression that can be found in the middle of the woods. We bring you to the Sierra Gorda Mountains of Mexico, where a gorgeous and undeniably mesmerizing sculpture garden is located. Although it isn't likely that you will just stumble upon it in the middle of the woods, even when you go intentionally, it will leave you bewildered. A man called Edward James began working on all of these sculptures back in the 1940s. It is one of the greatest contributions to surrealism, and it is placed in the middle of the forest. Cabin in the woods. How could we not talk about eerie cabins in the woods when we are thinking about disturbing things found in the forest? Let's just stick with a single example of what a scary experience visiting one such cabin could be during the night. Apparently, a group of friends decided to hang around one of these cabins during the night to experience some first-hand thrills. And the generous cabin definitely delivered on this. As they were hanging around, something moved in the darkness, and after briefly trying to see what it was, they just caught a glimpse of something that managed to get away. Left with only a brief sighting of a shadow that ran away, these people were taught that one shouldn't mess around with the freaky woods. Worrisome signs scattered across the forest. The next case we bring you happened in 2021, as a man who is a passionate hiker went on what should have been a typical adventure in Virginia. It isn't too surprising to find litter in the woods. We're not saying this isn't unfortunate, but it still is something we could stumble upon while walking through the forest. However, this all depends on what you find. What the man noticed sparked his curiosity, so he decided to investigate it some more. Apparently, in the litter that was thrown around, there were writings, and these words didn't seem to make much sense. Since he felt there was nothing to discover here, the man pushed through and stumbled upon more similar litter. This time, it sent out some more understandable messages. Some of them were about conspiracies, even mentioning the FBI. In the other piece, there are references to the character who is called the Wolfman. If this wasn't enough to make you think that walking away may be a good option, the next thing he found will persuade you. There was a duck that seemed to have been hunted down very recently. A man discovers something unbelievable in the forest. Compared to some of the people from all the examples we have seen, some aren't choosing to be in the woods on their own. Instead, they're taken there as a part of their jobs. This is what happened when one of these people was digging around the woods and managed to collect a 32-pound, or nearly 15-kilogram, heavy metal ball. Considering its shape and the effects of time, the man thought this was a cannonball, but after contacting the experts, he was told that it was actually a Civil War landmine that was still active. The man seems to have been very lucky. Thank you for symbolically hiking through all of the cases featuring disturbing things we have found in the forest. We hope you have enjoyed the thrill of the adventure throughout our video. Goodbye, and remember, don't get too comfortable and ignorant while hanging out in the forest.